You are listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 9th of April 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's program, Germany reaches a coalition deal at a critical time in global politics because today also happens to be the day of Trump's global tariffs coming into effect, and not everyone is happy.
I hope it is agreed that both Europe and the United States should move, ideally in my view, to a zero tariff situation.
Elon Musk, among those going public with their concerns, will ask whether the political tide just might be turning against Trump's signature policy. After that, we'll check in with Monocle's teams spread out across the Mediterranean at Salone del Mobile in Milan and the Delphi Economic Forum in Greece. And finally,
this moment from late 71 to the beginning of 73 was a kind of really special moment in their life that was very different from other times and hadn't been covered that much.
We speak to the co-director of a new documentary about John Lennon and Yoko Ono. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. For Germany's two post-war political powerhouse parties, the Christian Democratic Union and the Social Democrats, there has been a palpable urgency to once again reach a coalition deal after February's general elections, in which the CDU came out top, but the SPD had its worst result in history. Post-war history. The urgency is mostly down to the state of the world and a rudderless Europe, hoping that Germany, with a new government, may once again take up its role as leader of the continent. Well, Suda David Wilp is Vice President of External Relations and Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund's Berlin office and joins us now. Suda, thanks for coming on the show at this key moment, because just in the last hour we have had word that a coalition has been agreed. What can you tell us?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for having me. It's true. It looks like negotiators for the coalition were together till about midnight last night, and there were still some minor details to be cleared up this morning. And there should be an announcement this afternoon about a coalition agreement between the center-right CDU, the Christian Democrats, led by Friedrich Merz, who will soon be chancellor, and the center-left SPD, to have another grand coalition, something that wasn't necessarily expected for Germany after Angela Merkel had a grand coalition 3 out of her 4 terms. But these are different times that Germany is facing, and it is taking both the majority parties to come together to form a stable coalition.
They are very much different times, and we are talking on the day that Donald Trump's tariffs are being introduced, among other issues to do with the state of the world. Has that focused minds in Berlin?
Absolutely, because coalition negotiations haven't really taken place in a vacuum this time around. In the recent cycles, it's taken an awful long time for a coalition agreement to be hammered out. And actually, last time, it was a 3-party constellation. This coalition looks like it's coming together in less than 50 days, which is record time for Germany in a very fragmented political landscape. But I think Europe is waiting for German leadership. And because of pressures from Washington and from Moscow, Germany has to realize that it needs to also step up and try to work out its internal domestic arguments about migration and taxes and start playing a role in Europe to make it a more capable geopolitical actor. And they have taken steps to do so. During the last Bundestag, the debt brake was loosened so that Germany now has fiscal authority to change the needle in Europe when it comes to military spending and infrastructure spending.
As you mentioned there, Suda, I mean, the heavy lifting was in a way done ahead of this coalition deal because of the lifting of the debt brake and basically a massive spending package agreed on defense and infrastructure. But still, as you say, there were major differences on policy, particularly migration. Do we get a sense of how united this coalition will actually be?
Well, there was a lot of pressure within the CDU, CSU on Friedrich Merz to make sure that He stuck to the hardline policies that he promised to enact if he were to become chancellor. And so we will see what was agreed upon when the details of the coalition agreement are unveiled. I can't imagine that he would have watered down too much, because even though the CDU came in first place at the election at the end of February, the AfD is going to be the strongest. The far-right party in Germany will be the strongest party in the opposition. And if you look at polls today, they are basically neck and neck right now, the CDU and AfD. And so you may have a situation in 4 years, if this coalition doesn't deliver, that the AfD actually comes in first place.
Well, that is the big question, isn't it? Because the alternative for Germany is that strong at the moment, also in polling, in part because of this idea that Germany is lifting the debt brake and going to spend money on infrastructure and so on. There is an irony there I'd have to ask about, because this lifting of the debt brake is a sign that Germany is trying to actually, make big policy adjustments with this new coalition. Is that not what voters want?
I think it's true, because in 2009, when the debt brake was embedded in the Constitution, Germany was facing a very different world, and geopolitical threats seemed very far away. And now these threats are right at the doorstep. There is a war raging against Ukraine that's not too far from Germany. Germany has brought in a number of refugees from Ukraine and is also spending money on supporting Ukraine. And now, of course, the question about the United States being the last security guarantor on the continent is also kind of up for debate. And so there is finally a realization that Germany needs to act. The question, will it be able to act in a speedy manner? Will there be cuts in bureaucracy, in questions about procurement, and also mindset change? You could spend money on military kit, but you also need people in the armed forces to operate the equipment. So these are all things that we will be watching in the next few months here in Berlin.
And finally, Sudha, when it comes to the United States in particular, given, as we mentioned at the top, this is the day that tariffs are being officially enacted, do we get a sense of how the German government, the new coalition, will react to that, how they will want Europe to respond? Of course, it is Brussels and the European Union that's taking the lead, but what does Germany want to do? This is going to affect them as an export nation more than most.
No doubt about it that the tariffs certainly expedited the coalition talks. I think that there was a realization in Berlin that, they couldn't have discussions forever while the German economy continues to tank. And I think for Germany, it's going to be important that Brussels, of course, speaks with strength and with unity. But I think this country, and along with other nations in Europe, and this will be the test, that are also weary of perhaps challenging the White House too much, and to see if there are ways to negotiate behind closed doors. And for now, that has been under the portfolio, of course, of the Commissioner for Trade, Šefčovič, in Brussels. And the new government will certainly, of course, have an influence in Brussels moving forward.
Sudha David Wilp of the German Marshall Fund in Berlin. Thank you very much for joining us. And now here's Monica Lillis with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. US President Donald Trump's sweeping reciprocal tariffs on dozens of countries have come into force, deepening his global trade war and spurring widespread selling across financial markets. China is the hardest hit, facing 104% duties on its imported goods. Beijing has vowed countermeasures. Indonesia's president has said that the nation is ready to temporarily shelter Palestinians hit by the war in Gaza. This comes ahead of his trip to the Middle East and Turkey this week. Prabowo Subianto said on Wednesday that he instructed his foreign minister to quickly discuss evacuation plans with the Palestinian side. The Associated Press agency is to be allowed to report once again from the White House. A judge ordered the Trump administration to restore its access to presidential events. The White House blocked the news agency in a dispute over the term Gulf of America. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Monica. Now, as you heard in the headlines, the Trump administration's tariff tariff policy officially enters into force today. And to add to those headlines just in the last minute, as Monica was speaking, China says it will impose additional tariffs of 84% on U.S. goods from April 10th. And we're going to focus a bit more on tariffs now, because if there is a reason that the White House has been able to implement much of its agenda without opposition from inside the Republican Party, it would be because of the simple fact that Trump wins elections. With that political power has also come the financial backing of businesses and billionaires in the U.S. who have swung to his side. But the current stock market rout over his global tariffs could be a sign that things are changing. Major business leaders are starting to speak up. That includes Elon Musk, while the average voter in the U.S. is about to see the price of consumer goods rise significantly. Well, joining me now is the Washington reporter H.J. Mai for more on this. Good afternoon to D.C. Good morning to D.C., H.J. The clearest symbol of these fault lines on tariffs that we are seeing has been a very public spat between Elon Musk and Peter Navarro, who is the architect of Trump's tariff policies. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, there has been a public spat between Peter Navarro, the trade advisor, and as you called him, the architect of this tariff plan that the White House has enacted, and Elon Musk. And that came after Peter Navarro joined CNBC yesterday to talk about the tariffs, and he called Tesla just a car assembler instead of a car manufacturer, and that apparently irked Musk the wrong way. And so he responded on X, on the social media platform, that Peter Navarro is a moron, and I think he also called him, he's dumber than a bag of bricks. And so that's clearly the most public spat that has erupted over tariffs. And there's been some reporting out there that Musk has really pushed the Trump administration and Trump himself to not go forward with the tariff plan. Musk has not publicly commented on those reports, but it's clear that those tariffs will affect, his company, especially Tesla, and he's not happy with it.
H.J., it has to be asked why all this is only coming out now, even if Elon Musk was pushing behind the scenes, because this was a signature policy of Donald Trump from the beginning. That was always clear. I mean, was there really any expectation that he would not follow through and merely threaten countries?
I mean, I think that for some of his advisors and maybe some people, especially on Wall Street, I think they had that expectation. We have seen it at the beginning of his second term that he threatened. Obviously, we've seen it with Mexico and Canada. He threatened tariffs. He paused tariffs. So I think there were some people, especially, business people here in the U.S., who thought that, those tariffs would be not as broad as they have been enacted. There would be more carve-outs for industries and imports that are important, to the U.S. economy. And so I think, that's where the shock at the moment comes from, that we hear that all of a sudden, business leaders who have supported Trump publicly, speak now out against this tariff policy. I think that's what it comes down to, this broad swath of tariffs, across the globe. And obviously, especially with important trading partners like China, obviously, the race to 104% for certain goods, this could really hurt some industries here in the U.S. And I think that's where this comes from. I think that, there were some people, even though, as you mentioned, Trump talked about tariffs, how much he loves the word, and that he would enact tariffs because that's how he thinks he can get manufacturing back to this country. I think some people were still surprised of just how broad those tariffs were, and that's where this backlash now comes from.
And H.J., what have you made of the role that business leaders might have in the U.S., and particularly with the Republican Party? How much power they might have if they are going to start speaking out? Could that turn the tide among Republican lawmakers, legislators, or are they going to be waiting for more of a broader reaction from voters?
I think it's both, to be honest. I think that there is some sway that business leaders have. If you think somebody like Jamie Dimon, who is obviously the CEO of JP Morgan, Chase, the biggest bank here in the country. I think, every time he speaks, that carries some weight, even for lawmakers. And we see it already especially in the Senate, that some Republicans are are very concerned about those tariffs and want to basically crawl back some power from the president when it comes to enacting tariffs. There's especially, Ted Cruz from Texas, Rand Paul from Kentucky. They even introduced a bill yesterday in the Senate that would claw those powers back because, they call tariffs a tax on Americans, and only Congress has the power to enact tax legislation. So there's already the pushback, but I think it would be especially in the House, legislators are still waiting for the response from consumers. I think once, the public sees the price hikes in certain goods that are expected to come, or if this country really, or the global economy goes into a recession, I think that would, put most Republicans over the edge to push back against this. But at the moment, it's very much in the Senate. And I think, the sway of business leaders is there. But I think, it really will become pertinent and there will be some measures taken once the public is feeling the pain.
H.J. Mai in Washington, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing. I'm Chris Chermak. The Delphi Economic Forum has been coming into its own over the last few years as a spot for Mediterranean and Balkan nations to gather and make their mark on the world and its politics. Monocle contributor and host of the Foreign Desk, Andrew Muller, is fast becoming a regular at the forum and joins us now from Delphi. Andrew, I just looked up the weather, I have to say, in Delphi. It's a beautiful location, but it currently says cool with more clouds than sun. If that isn't symptomatic for the world today, I don't know what is.
That is an astute choice of metaphor, Chris, and one I dearly wish I'd thought of myself. No, as you remember from being here last year yourself, one of the enticements for coming to Delphi is a solid 4 or 5 day blast of glorious sunshine up here in the foothills of Mount Olympus. But no, very much not. There are storm clouds actual to accompany the storm clouds metaphorical.
The storm clouds metaphorical are also being leaned into, as I understand. The topic for this year is realignment, which basically means everyone is talking about Trump and whether to engage or abandon the US politically or economically. How has all that played out so far?
Well, so far, at least, we are in sort of preparatory hubbub stage. The sessions start properly actually around now. But even just talking to people this morning while we've been knocking back a few cappuccinos, it is very clear that President Trump is going to be the dominant theme of conversation, which I'm sure would please him, even if it doesn't please anybody here. And that right there is a marked contrast. I've been to the last couple of these things, and it is usually, given the location, quite understandably, a forum for talking about matters pertaining to the Mediterranean, to the Balkans, with maybe a bit of Eastern Europe and Russia thrown in. And I think, the last two of these, I'm pretty sure I got through the entire thing without anybody even really mentioning President Biden. But for obvious reasons, Donald Trump is going to be the subtext of pretty much everything.
And one subtext there is also the topic of defense spending that I wanted to ask you about, because Greece itself has upped its defense spending, or is upping its defense spending to 2%. What are they looking, as the hosts, what are they looking to get out of this?
I think for Greece, this event it's always a way of reminding people of Greece's importance. And Greece is a curious country in that respect, in that it's not, in terms of population, a big country. It's barely bigger than London. But obviously, Greece has a colossal global commercial footprint. It controls maybe a fifth of the world's commercial shipping. It has an incalculable cultural footprint, given the size and spread of its diaspora and the high regard in which Greek culture and Greek cuisine are held all over the world. So I think this is also Greece demonstrating that it has real political and diplomatic heft as well, that they can sort of summon people to gather up this hill more or less in the middle of nowhere. And the importance of it is it's demonstrated in two directions. One is that both the president and the prime minister turn up to address this thing. And the other is that the opponents of the prime minister choose today of all days to organise a general strike across Greece. And I don't think it's coincidental that they picked today to do it.
They will want us talking about it, so perhaps we'll talk about it briefly. What is this general strike, and how much of a trouble is it causing in Greece?
Loads. I mean, it's causing considerable trouble for this event in that lots of people simply cannot come anymore, because among the things that are affected by the strike is Athens Airport, which is just shut. It is a big deal. Both the major public sector and major private sector unions have called everybody out. It's hard to get much of a sense of that from Delphi, which is this tiny little village, and it's very, very remote. But yeah, in the big cities, it will be very, very different from the usual buzz of Greece's cities today. Everything is pretty much closed. The protest it's sort of associated with the train disaster of 3 Februaries ago, which has it's become one of those things which has turned into a kind of lightning rod for discontent about more or less everything else. There were protests in February on the second anniversary of the crash, which did get quite rowdy. But this is the union suggesting, I think, to the centre-right government of Kyriakos Mitsotakis that if Greece has indeed recovered itself financially from the sink it was in circa 2012, can we possibly therefore have slightly better pay and a better chance to keep up with the cost of living?
Just finally, Andrew, I understand our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, is also there, assuming he was managing to avoid the general strikes. There will be a panel with the Greek tourism minister. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Tyler, I can confirm, has avoided the general strike. I spoke to him not long ago while he's on his way here. His vehicle is wending him up the hill from Athens as we speak. Yeah, he will be appearing later today with Greece's tourism minister, and it will be partly promoting Greek tourism, obviously, but it will also be discussing how to manage Greek tourism, because it's not like Greece has any great shortage of tourists. It's one of the most popular tourist spots in the world, and quite rightly, but it does have issues, as many places now do, about managing that influx and how you do it without destroying the stuff that the people come here to see in the first place.
Andrew Muller in Delphi. We'll let you get back to it. Thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. The Delphi Economic Forum is not the only major Mediterranean event with a significant Monocle presence this week. That's because we are on day 2 officially of Salone del Mobile in Milan, and here to tell us all about it is our very own Milan resident, Ed Stalker, Monocle's Europe editor at large. Ed, how have you welcomed your fellow Monocle staffers to Milan?
Good afternoon to you. Yeah, well, we went out last night. I took them to kind of one of the city's historical trattorias, and then we went to Barbasso, because that's part of the tradition. You've got to go to Barbasso, which of course is the bar in Città Studi where a lot of the design crowd hang out. And I have to say, I'm going to make a confession. I do have a slight headache today. I could be feeling better. But yeah, we were all there till the wee hours of the morning, or the Monocle contingent from London. So yeah, it was good to catch up with everyone. And now they're all dispersed around town, visiting, showrooms and installations, and even heading to the fairs. So it's incredible. There's so much to see.
Ed, aside from the headache, which I imagine you're not the only one nursing today, what is this like for you and for Milan residents? I'm curious to have all these people come here. I mean, do you all sort of lean into it and travel around the city as well? Or is it more like the United Nations in New York, where you just hear complaints about the traffic?
I think some people decide to escape, but obviously not for us, because, we want to be here in the thick of it. Some people, maybe choose to rent their apartments out. They can probably make a nice bit of cash from that. But personally, I love it because, Milan does, it shifts and it changes, and it's already, I said this before on the radio, but it's already become a much more international city. But it just goes that mile, really, during this week. People from all over the world. And our fashion editor, Natalie, was saying to me, we were in a bar on Monday night, and she was like, is this always like this on a Monday night? I was like, no, not really, actually. Milan's a little more tranquil outside of this week, and even a sort of cafe near my son's school that I saw yesterday was full of the sort of design crowd, and it's just slightly different when this week isn't on. I'd say that some of those design people are not sitting having coffee in the early hours of the morning and probably nursing a hangover. So yeah, it's just really fun. There's just so much to see. I don't know. It just feels like this year there's even more to see, and so there's a sort of trying to work out how you can see as much as possible in the week's course. But yeah, it's a really good energy, and we're getting some good stuff done as well. Some good content which you should check out on Monocle Minute on Design, among other formats, and the radio, of course.
We would encourage everyone to check out Monocle's content on Salone del Mobile, but interesting, as you described there, the design crowd mingling with Milan's residents and children, and then you also have, I suppose, the international design crowd mingling with the Italian design crowd. What is this like for Italian design? It kind of puts them at the center of the world as well.
Well, of course, Italian design would argue, if it could speak, that it was the center of world's design anyway. I mean, look, this is such an important event for design. Milan arguably is the design capital of the world. Brianza, just outside the city, is the production hub. And it still is the most important event for design and furniture, arguably, in the world. And so it's a great chance for, of course, the Italian industry, but a lot of sharing of ideas, for exposure to designers from other parts of the world, to exposure from public from all over the world. So I think it's good for the scene, as well as the business that is done. It's a chance for people to share ideas. And of course, it's that sharing of ideas that can lead to possible future collaborations and new ways for the industry to sort of change and expand. So it's an exciting time. This sort of event goes from strength to strength. There are, as we've said before, of course, two sides. There's the sort of trade fair itself, and then there's Milan Design Week, which are all the events that are happening around town. You may be able to hear that I'm actually on the street. I've just been to an event, and on cue, a tram is going past me. So you may have heard the bell going. So yeah, I'm out in the thick of it on the street. I've just been to an event with Benny Ruggs, who did a collaboration with the Studio KO. And before that, I was at the Casino event, which is in this incredible theatre that I'd actually never been to before. And that's another great thing about this for me, as someone who lives here. I've walked past that theatre before, and it looks nice from the outside, but when you actually go inside, you're like, wow, these interiors are incredible. So the chance to also discover new palazzi and other new buildings, to get inside those spaces and see them being brought to life is kind of incredible. Just, seeing the production and the thought and the time that goes into all these brands and designers bringing their showcases and installations to life is amazing to see.
Ed Stalker, I'm just hoping that tram bell didn't impact your headache too much. We'll let you get back to things in Milan and prepare for this evening as well. This is The Briefing. And finally, on today's show, you might think you've seen, read, and listened to everything about the Beatles, or even vaguely Beatle tangential, but a new film proves that footage about the band and its associates can still surprise and captivate audiences. 1-to-1, John and Yoko uses newly restored footage and unseen material to tell a story about John Lennon and Yoko Ono that is rarely given airtime. At the heart of it is the 1-to-1 benefit concert that was held by the duo in New York in 1972. But the film really tells a much deeper story about the couple, about New York as a city, and the cultural moment that was the 1970s. It is directed by Kevin MacDonald and co-directed and edited by Sam Rice-Edwards. Sam Rice-Edwards came to Midori House right here in London to meet Monocle's Robert Bound and discuss the film.
Sam, congratulations on a really wonderful film, One-to-One, John and Yoko, co-directed by yourself and Kevin MacDonald. I watched it again this morning. As we said before we switched on the mics, it was a wonderful thing to see a screening on the big screen with great speakers, all the rest of it, but it ranks on the small screen too. I want to know, first of all, how you as a director and as an editor, how you get under the skin of that thing, how you get the energy of those live performances of New York in that era, and indeed of those two great creative minds onto the screen, how you capture that fizzle and dazzle.
Thanks very much for the intro, and I'm really happy that you enjoyed the film. I mean, with the concert, I'll start with the concert. That was very badly filmed, actually, and it forced us into something where we actually didn't cut very much, and we had very long shots during the sequences of the concert. And a lot of close-ups to really kind of focus in on John or Yoko and so we could see their emotion on screen, and that way we felt, we could watch the concert and enjoy the concert, but really kind of get to know them at the same time. And yeah, I think it also gave a slight feeling of being at a concert as well. Those sequences, because often traditionally in concert. This isn't a concert film, but in concert films, there's a lot of cutting and a lot of cuts, and actually that doesn't really feel like being at a concert. Whereas here, we have long shots and we're kind of really focusing on John or Yoko. So I think that gives the feeling of being there and sort of brings a certain energy. Yeah, it does.
As I say, it really crackles off the screen. John Lennon's in an interesting... Both John and Yoko are at a very interesting point in their creative lives. John busting out of the barroom brawl that the Beatles became, I suppose, into the sort of mad energy of New York, and he and Yoko live in a two bedroom apartment in Greenwich Village, down the road, I think, from Jerry Rubin, who plays quite a large role in the film, who's the kind of radical activist of the time. So he kind of goes into becoming a sort of fully paid up member of becoming a kind of countercultural American icon, I suppose. That's often written about, but it's rarely seen, I suppose. That must have been interesting footage to be playing with.
The whole kind of thing started with the concert footage and Kevin being approached to make this film, but really it was very wide open as to what the film could be, and we sat around kind of scratching our heads for a while and sort of feeling our way forward, and it started to become clear that really, this moment from late 71 to the beginning of 73 was a kind of really special moment in their life that was very different from other times and hadn't been covered that much, as you say, in film. And I think, you can sort of sum it up in the way of the fact that two of the most well-known people in the world moved to New York to escape the sort of England and the Beatles and all the furore around that, and they moved into essentially a studio apartment that the door opened onto the street, and that would just never happen now. It very rarely would happen then.
Go wrong?
Exactly. So we kind of felt that this really was a kind of defined time in their lives. And that is why, some elements of the only shot element of the film is the reconstruction of their apartment, which we felt was the kind of spatial core of the film, the sort of, geographical core of the film. It was an important element in the film.
Yeah, it certainly is. I'd like to talk about how you did the reconstruction. It's as you say, it's kind of quite central to the film because it's the one shot bit. It's the one thing that you can control ultimately, I suppose, as filmmakers. And you've got different storytelling devices in the film. There's obviously the concert footage itself and the sort of on-stage, off-stage business of that. You've got, Lennon, I think, said that he and Yoko just got this apartment and spent the first year in America watching the TV.
Yeah.
He possibly with tongue in cheek, but you kind of dive into that. And a lot of your narrative device is news footage. It's obviously the civil rights was first and foremost, the Attica prison riot and how that was suppressed. And then, and obviously the Vietnam War. So there's all these, and then the protest movement more generally happening. So there's a lot of stuff bubbling in the great cauldron of the culture and the counterculture. So let's talk about the archive. Where do you go first? Were you offered a kind of great wealth to dig into, a kind of treasure trove of stuff?
Just to sort of lead into that, on the TV, they did actually. I mean, it's not. Yeah, I know it's sort of, he was slightly joking in that bit in the film, but they did actually sit around watching TV a lot.
Yeah.
And they were sort of obsessed by television, and what we were trying to do in the film really is to create the feeling that they had, you know, to like a time capsule.
Channel hop like they would have been doing.
Exactly.
Seeing the same adverts, the same newscasters.
Exactly. So the viewer, hopefully when they see the film, they can see the world, what the world looked like through the eyes of John and Yoko at that time.
I mean, I love that as a device. It's great. And it's fascinating in its own right, but it's, as you say, fascinating to see what they would have been seeing.
Exactly. And we kind of thought that it's a way of actually kind of getting closer to their experience, and instead of forcing a narrative on the film, we could let that play out and let the viewer really kind of experience that time for themselves and sort of travel with John and Yoko through 1972.
Sam Rice-Edwards in conversation with Monocle's Robert Bound there. 1-to-1 John and Yoko is in cinemas this Friday. You can also tune into Monocle on Culture with Rob Bound on Mondays. Brand new episodes at 2000 London time. That's all for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Monica Lillis. Our researcher was Francesca Jilks, and our studio manager was Flynn Simons. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.